just given everything that's happening, I don't know if you want to just kind of weigh in on the situation in Afghanistan, the withdrawal of US troops, where things stand today.
Sure. Just to begin with, this was not a military victory of the Taliban. It was a political victory. Because the die was cast a year ago when Trump said he was going to pull out all American troops, and then he pulled down the numbers to 2,500, which is almost nothing. As we've seen, 2,500 troops is not enough even to guard the Kabul airport. So the Taliban could have at any time in the last year have taken over the country, but they've been waiting, and for two reasons. One, they don't want to get into a war with the Americans. They want to wait until the Americans have finally left. That's a war they can't easily win. But the other thing they were doing is systematically going region by region and making deals with the local warlords and with the local military leaders, which is the way that Afghanistan has always been run. It's been a coalition of tribal forces. This was the nature of the Taliban before we got there, and the reason why it fell, why the Taliban collapsed so quickly when the Americans invaded. The local warlords saw that, well, Taliban is a losing number. We're not going to support them anymore. They withdrew their support, and the Americans took over Afghanistan virtually without a fight. The same way now as the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan virtually without a fight, because they had already made the deals. They just went systematically from place to place and with the deals they've already made. And so there was no need for fighting. So this was, this happened last year. So Trump's decision has just now finally been played out. That's the reality of what's happened in Afghanistan. And of course, it happened very suddenly because there was no need for fighting. It was simply, okay, we've made the deal. The time has come. All right, guys, let's get on board. And that's exactly what has happened, including in the city of Kabul. Of course, years ago when I was in Afghanistan, I was struck even then by the difference between the life in the countryside and life in the city. Because life in the countryside is run by ethnic, tribal groups, mostly the Pashtuns in the south, the Tajiks in the north, and then regional warlords. Whereas the city is more multicultural and modern. And so you have this tension, urban and rural tension, which is played out politically the world over. I mean, look at the political dynamics in our own country. It's to a large extent the ethnically homogenous rural against the multicultural urbane cities. And this is true in Turkey. And this is true in so many parts of the world today. This is the real political dynamics that we're facing. And it's certainly true in Afghanistan. So yes, there will continue to be people within the cities who are shocked and disturbed. They had, for 20 years, thought they were living in America. And to some extent they were. But it was a fiction, and it was due to fail sooner or later. And I agree with Biden that the US was there far longer than it needed to have been. I mean, I even question whether we needed to have gone in the first place, to hunt down bin Laden. Did we really need to take over and then try to run a country by ourselves, which turned out to be an impossible situation, just as it had for the Soviets before us, the same situation.
Do you see us having a relationship with Afghanistan under the Taliban rule? And headlines today, we're kind of a kinder, gentler Taliban, if you will. Your thoughts on that? Is this a new generation?
Well, it's certainly a new generation, simply an age, because the old Mullah Omar generation of 20 years ago has literally passed away. But it's also a new generation in terms of communications, contact with the world. There were no cell phones 20 years ago, and now 70% of Afghans have cell phones. It's a different world. And the Taliban knows that they have to run a country. So the question is, are they going to run it like ISIS? Are they going to run it like Saudi Arabia or Iran, which are also religious states, but states that we have learned to live with and that have a modicum of diversity and within them? They're not America by any means, But my guess is that the Taliban will be more like the Saudis than like ISIS. For one reason, they have to keep this coalition together. They don't want to happen what happened the last time when the Taliban fell, and that is this coalition of regional warlords simply stopped supporting them and faded away. So they're going to have to continue to curry their favor, to carry their support, to get them involved. The Taliban, I think, has learned that to maintain itself over time, it has to respond to a number of different forces, which certainly makes for a bit more moderate kind of regime. Although, of course, they have a religious ideology that they have to uphold for ideological reasons as well. And that looks like Saudi Arabia or Iran.
When's the last time you were in Afghanistan? When is the next time that you might travel back? Would you travel?
Oh, I was there years ago when I was living in India, and it was fairly easy to go from Peshawar over the Khyber Pass to Kabul. I enjoyed doing that because it's a beautiful city, and I just enjoyed Afghanis as a people, and I enjoyed the territory. We'll see. We'll see how available it is for foreigners to come and visit. My guess is that there will be at least limited access for people from the outside to come, if I am right, if it is more like Iran and Saudi Arabia than like ISIS.
And then just lastly, Joe Coffey at home, sitting on his couch, why should this be important to him?
Well, in the long run of things, it's not important in that this doesn't affect American lives, although I think it's a strong lesson about the folly of getting engaged in wars that we can't win and that are not worth fighting in the first place. So I think the US will certainly be very wary about new military engagements following both on Iraq, which after all, it was our presence there that helped to create ISIS. And then our presence in Afghanistan that helped to empower the Taliban, because part of their message has been anti-Americanism and reclaiming Afghanistan for Afghanis, for Pashtuns. And that's because they had an enemy, the Americans, to be their foil. So I think we've learned that our meddling in other countries can really be very dangerous business. It can harm us as well as help us. I don't see this endangering our standing in the global community in the long run, the way some observers have claimed. In the short run, I think simply because of the suddenness of it, and the fact that the US, for whatever reason, didn't have time to really reach out to a lot of our allies to work out a correlated response. That's unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to be deeply damaging in the long run.
Okay, good points. Anything else that you want to add? I could ask you a million other questions, including what happens to people who aren't able to airlift out, and including the Americans and our allies, partners rather.
I don't know. Certainly, it's not in the interest of the Taliban to keep Americans in Afghanistan, and it, at least so far, at least the leadership has shown no interest in revenge killings. Just the opposite. They're trying to. They realize that they have a public relations problem within Afghanistan, particularly in the cities, to get the Afghanis on their side, and so they want to try to have as a little of image of reprisals and retribution. Although unfortunately, a lot of the soldiers are just, rural people from the boonies, and they're still in a fighting mode, and they're going to do what they're going to do. So I think there's a big disconnect between what the leaders would like to happen and what actually happens. So it's hard to say how much in peril are the lives either of Americans or of our Afghan supporters once there's a final withdrawal. I mean, already it's almost impossible, even if you're in Kabul, just to get to the airport and then get through the mobs into the gates and get inside where you can get on a plane. It's it's a terrible situation, no question about it. Although in truth, what Biden said yesterday, I think is true. I can't imagine how this would be done differently. I mean, once the city is in the control of the Taliban, it's in control of the Taliban.
All right. Anything else that you want to add?
No, I'm always happy to respond to questions.
All right. I thank you so much for your time. And for time's sake, I'm keeping it pretty simple again, but may reach out in the
Sure.
coming weeks if that's okay.
I'd be happy to do so.